Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss of internet shitlords, and as you can see, there's a meatball. I don't know what's been up with her, but she's been acting weird all night. She's been mewing at me as if she wants me to do something, and I don't know what it is. I've fed her, I've watered her, I've changed her litter, I've done everything. Maybe she just wants to hang around. Are you just in a mood to hang around, meatball? That might be why. Alright, so today, before I get started, let me remind you again about the Pundit Files, which you can find in the Red Room store. The link will be in the description below. The latest issue of the Pundit Files, number 10, is now the biggest ever. Like, the previous one was the biggest before that one, and it was like 22 pages, which was the Invisible College 1930s campaign. But right away, we did another one that's a little bit bigger even. Not intentionally at the beginning, but because it turned into a collaboration between me and the Mad Hermit, who knows a lot about horses. And so the Pundit Files 10 is about authentic jousting rules and horses. So if you're looking for something to add that medieval flair, where you can learn about all the different techniques of jousting and some recommended mechanics for how to handle jousts, and then also about like all kinds of really cool details and tables that you can use to give horses in your D&D party a personality, especially if you've got like, I don't know, a knight or something like that. His horse should be something significant, right? And this gives it real characteristics, and that's written by the Mad Hermit, who's, he's done a really great job on that. You can still get it at the Red Room, only at the Red Room store, and it's still, in spite of being almost 30 pages, it's still just $3.50, okay? So, today, I wanted to talk to you, oh yeah, one more thing, sorry, before I forget. Wednesday night, I am going to be guest starring on Diversity and Dragons live stream, so be sure not to miss that, because he has received an advanced copy of, a PDF copy, but a copy nonetheless, of Baptism of Fire. And so we are going to be talking about the game. We're going to be talking about what's in it. We're going to be talking all kinds of stuff, whatever Double D wants. It's his show, of course, but I'm hoping that it'll help people learn more about my upcoming next big game that's coming out hopefully anytime. It's stuck in a waiting list on drive-thru right now, but we hope that they'll actually get to printing the proof very soon, and then that'll be it. Then we'll be able to go live, okay? All right, so now on to the topic of today. This is a topic, one of those topics that people recommended to me, right? Like, every once in a while I ask people, hey, tell me what you think would be an interesting topic for me to do as a video. Usually like, I have videos where I rant about some controversy going on in the hobby, and in those videos, usually it comes up topically by news, although some people try to send me like scoops of news that I might not have yet seen, which I'm always grateful for. The second is like, you were taught D&D wrong on purpose, where I talk about people who, about problems in like gaming and how to game and all that sort of thing. And then the third type of videos is reviews, and people send me their books to review. And in this case, people send me things that they think would be a good topic to talk about in terms of like how to be a good game designer or a good DM or whatever. And one of the things that I've gotten from a couple of people was about problems in combat in RPG play. And I think one of the ones that was like kind of the most elaborated one is somebody who had asked me to how would you deal with DMs that are just dialing it in when it comes to the combat. And I kind of have to try to figure out what that concept of dialing it in is really meant to imply, but one can assume that what it means is that you're just, there can be in a lot of games this thing of, well, okay, we're going to attack now, so we're going to fight now, so they roll initiative, and then it's, okay, your side, go ahead, roll an attack, I missed, okay, now the other side's going to roll, okay, they hit, they did 2 points of damage, and there's no narration and stuff like that. And then some people, what they want is for the games, for combat in the game, to be a lot more dynamic than that, And so what I'm going to say is, first of all, this is not exclusively a DM issue, right? Because it's not, the DM isn't the only one that can be responsible for combat being boring or uninspiring in the game. Okay, there's also the players, right? And then there's also the system, right? Which is to say the game designer, the type of game that you're running. Because there are going to be some DMs. No, hang on. Let me start with the other two, right? There are going to be some game systems that are designed to have very complex combat. Some of them that are designed to have very simple combat. Some of them that are designed to have combat that provides a wide variety of options, either an open option sort of thing of like, what do you do? And then the DM has to quantify that into some kind of a check. Or sometimes in a structured set of options, right, where there's multiple different types of attacks that one can do, and that what type of attack will determine how it's rolled and how it's resolved, right? And then there's other games that have very few options, right? There are some games where you just resolve an entire combat with one roll, right? That can happen too. Those are usually kind of these weirdo games where combat isn't meant to be the point, but still, that can happen, right? And with players, you sometimes have players that think of D&D fundamentally as a kind of war game, right? These are guys that will either want to be playing with miniatures, or if they're doing theater of the mind, it had better be really detailed and really thought out. They want to have a lot of multiple options of tactics, right? These are the type of people that are gonna love rules about like things like attacks of opportunity and that sort of thing. And what they're basically doing is they're wishing that it's still a war game, right? And then okay, that's all right. You know, maybe that might not be totally fair. So it might be some people that really love that kind of war gamey aspect of certain RPGs, and also like a lot of role play, right? The second potential group is that you can have people that would absolutely not like that, but what they would like is to have super dramatic combat scenes, right? Where there's like all of these tremendous things going on and players can stop for monologues, and you can have like, convenient objects in the room that make things more interesting. They want the drama to pass into not just, them playing their characters and all that, but that every combat should have like this intense dramatism, Both of those are the wargamer types and the theater kid types are not players I care for very much, right? I like people that get up to a certain point on those levels, but not beyond that, right? And then the third group are basically people that just, that they like combat in D&D, but the combat isn't the be-all and end-all. And what they mainly want out of combat is for it to be interesting enough, simple enough to use, and something that will be neither too short nor too long, right? And how much that is might depend, but generally speaking, the majority of gamers, what they want is for the combat to have some excitement. The excitement for them can mostly be based on the die rolls, I have 10 hit points. Oh, the guy's going to hit me. He's rolling a d10. Okay, he rolled a 6. I still have 4 hit points left. I'm going to try to attack him now, and maybe I'll do defensive fighting, so I'll have -2 to attack, but I'll get +2 to my armor class. That sort of thing, right? That's kind of like your standard D&D type combat, D&D is not set up, actually, to make, in most editions, with maybe the exception of 3E, I guess, could do it, right? But it would be a real hassle anyways. It's not really set up to be a miniature skirmish game, right? It breaks down after you have more than a certain number of figures anyway. So you can do those. But, that was one of the problems with 3rd edition, was that sometimes a combat, once you have to factor in all of the feats and all of the special exemptions and all the rules and all the conditions, and you have to look it all up, battles that probably should not have been so major could take up like an hour of the session, and I think that a lot of gamers don't like that. Now there are some that do, right? And so it will kind of depend. It depends on the player. The player can make can have a combat that is exciting or that isn't, and part of it depends on their level of collaboration or not, you know. But in any of those kind of contexts for the player, what still matters is that it be that the conflict be within the confines of what type, right? Whether we're talking about drama kit conflict, or we're talking about wargamer conflict, or we're talking about like your standard D&D fight, it can be made more or less boring by the level of participation of the players and the level of participation of the DM. And so here we get back to the DM, that the DM is in fact still, even though I would want to make it clear that you can have a great DM, but if his players just can't engage and he can't get them to engage, then it's not going to work out, right? And you know, you could also have a great DM, but if the system that is being played is not the right one for the type of combat that the party wants, then that's not going to work out either, you know? So it's not all up to the DM alone, but it is mostly up to the DM, because it is up to him. First of all, it's up to him to try to resolve those problems when they come up, the problems I mentioned. And second, it is also up to the DM to be providing encounter scenarios that are sufficiently interesting for the type of party that it is. And he's got to know what type of party he's really dealing with, what the players are like, right? Because if you've got a group of players who mostly just want to kind of do a standard D&D thing, you will not want to put in front of them a game mat and start doing like, you know, a high effort tactical battle game, right? Like you don't want to do that. And I mean, if they are these kind of like martial players, right? Then what you don't want to do for them is have this kind of like abstract theater kid style of super dramatic play that doesn't really have to be covered by the dice rolls, but it's more about the role play, right? So all of that has to be taken into account. And ultimately, from my perspective, the system is important because it'll depend on that whether or not it meshes with the players. But the bigger part of it is that you need to have, let's say that we're talking about standard D&D or, you know, an OSR style, typical OSR style play, right? You want to have your combat have some descriptive elements so that players know where they are. They know what's going on. You don't want to turn it into something that is so abstract that that all you're doing is rolling a die and you have no idea what's going on in the fight, right? So you have to be able to describe the scene. You have to describe the place where it is. You have to describe the opponent, where and how they're attacking, unless of course they're doing a surprise attack, in which case you're being attacked out of nowhere, and then the player characters have to figure it out, right? It can be good to have twists once in a while in combat, but contrary to what the person who asked me to talk about this might have expected, my advice is not that you should make each and every combat completely unique, you know, that it should be its own marvelous little snowflake of a scene, right? Because that's very hard to do in a way that won't seem fake. All right, you should always have a clear description of the world that the player characters see, because fundamentally all of this comes down to, like, you could have a system that is very, very simple. D&D's system of combat by default is relatively very simple for an RPG, right? It doesn't require that the players have a bunch of special powers. It doesn't require that they have a lot of different optioning maneuvers. They have some, in some games more than others, right? And sometimes adding one or two more options in combat can make a difference, but you add too many of them and that ends up burdening the system. That's the problem with like the 3.5e play and so on and so forth, and even some of the 5e stuff, when you have to worry about like conditions and modifiers and all of that, right? But if you know, like for example, in Lion and Dragon, the combat system is very standard to kind of the basic D&D combat, right? You roll initiative, you roll to hit against armor class. If you hit, you roll the damage dice, right? But there's a couple of things that are added in there apart from those sort of standards. And the two really important ones are the blocking rule. So you can use your shield, if you're a martial class, you can use your shield to parry another opponent's attack, right? And the critical tables. So I added into Lion and Dragon. In Lion and Dragon, it's one table. Later on in the old school companion, I added specific tables for type of weapon, of critical hit damage. That's what happens on if you get a 20 on the roll. So if you do get a 20 on the roll, you then roll another d20 and check on this table where you may add your level if you are a fighter class. If not, you just roll the d20. And the result is the type of injury the person got and where they got that injury. And that sort of thing is a very good example of using something that adds flavor to it without being a constant additional burden of time or effort. Because it's only going to happen like 1 out of every 20 rolls, right? that table will end up being used. So it's quite a good setup. Baptism of Fire will have those full critical tables in the main rule book, by the way. So if you're using that and you're being effective in the descriptive context, then not every battle has to be the epic battle, because if every battle's the epic battle, then no battle's really epic, right? It all just turns into the normal battle, and it becomes a matter of, what big descriptive block is the DM going to read us, or what weird twist is this room going to have? They all have weird twists, right? Like, that's kind of I've been thinking recently about the latest, I think it's the latest, Chartreuse Shadows, I think it's called, is the latest Venture Satanis book, and I noticed in his dungeon, he has this dungeon many levels, and it's really fun, it's hilarious, it's a romp, right? My players in my World of the Last Sun campaign, they were quite excited with it. They had a lot of fun with it, right? But it's like there are 40 rooms in that dungeon where you're entering into that room, and at the moment you enter that room, there is something that is about to end the entire world, right? Like relatively shortly, right? Either right away or, in not very long a time, right? And it's all just come together in the one same cavern complex at the same time, So it's like, you're like, okay, how many times are we going to face these things, right? That are about to do that. If we don't do something, it'll destroy everything, right? Like, so I thought it was like, the repetition doesn't having, when if you say, well, this dungeon has a demon prince at the bottom of it. Okay, great. If you say this dungeon has a demon prince in every room, even if your player characters are really tough, right, or whatever, that's not gonna make it more interesting. That's gonna make it more boring, right? So you have to have battles that can be resolved relatively quickly, small battles where the DM does not worry about any detail that isn't essential to the player's understanding of time and space in the world. And that then, if any one of them wants to try something clever, okay, great. Then you figure out how to make that something clever apply mechanically in the context of your adventure. But you don't have to be the one as the DM to be constantly doing that, right? I would say that probably if you're doing a dungeon crawling type, because this is a little bit different, because you might be running adventures where you're only going to probably have 1 or 2 combats in the entire adventure. That can happen, right? Like in a lot of my adventures, you have a lot of investigation and then like a climactic battle against the cult or the witch or the monster or whatever, right? Or a lot of traveling, and then that traveling, there might be some encounters, but then you're not constantly going from room to room fighting things. In a dungeon, you're having a lot more individual battles, right? So in a dungeon, you probably want 3 out of 5 battles to be very mundane, in fact, right? They're just, you go into this room, there are 2 bugbears there. Okay, we try to attack them. Did you surprise? Now roll initiative, then fight, and then they die, right? And then you loot them. And so a lot of that has to be that to create a sense of mundanity to the dungeon. So then you do like 1 out of 5 has some kind of small twist. Right, and then another 1 out of 5 is something that has some really interesting detail to it, right? And some really interesting element that makes it a very different kind of battle from the other ones, right? So like the small twist might be like there's some complication in the space of the battle, or there's some special element to the opponents or whatever, right? But and then the more epic thing is when you have like, maybe something ends up combining a lot of environments, like a number of different rooms, or that creates a time limit of something that PCs can do or not do, right? And, you know, those sorts of things that will then add in an element of drama that makes them think, oh, this battle's different than the others. And then that battle becomes more memorable to them. And that's kind of like the experience of real life, you know? Like, so, you know, like if you're going to the bus every day to go to work, you know, you're not going to remember most of the times you've been on the bus. If you go into the bus and then one time there's some maniac with a gun on the bus, you're going to remember that time, right? But if there was a maniac with a gun on the bus every day, it would start to become boring, right? It wouldn't work. You know, I would expect you'd probably stop taking the bus, but you know what I mean, right? So you don't want to overdo the drama. You don't want to dial it in necessarily, but you don't want to overdo the drama either. And so you have to know your audience to adjust just how much is too much. You know, I think that's basically the argument, what I'm trying to tell you guys. And I don't know. I hope that it helps the people that asked about this. But it's all about thinking it through and also knowing the players, right? And the players have a part in it too. So you have to know how to engage them the right way. And it'll depend on what type of people you have playing for you too. So, yeah, I guess that's everything. Be sure to check me out on Wednesday. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss my own live streams and stuff, because I'm sure I'll be doing some soon. And, you know, check out all of my products. I already mentioned the Pundit Files. Don't forget, check out the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. There's so much good stuff in there. You know, Elven Domes, Ancient Ruins, Generators, right, where you can create different versions of these things, right? Like, you know, mutants and humanoid creatures or non-humanoid creatures, robots. There's just a ton of stuff. And then there's magic items and monsters and creating alternate planes. All of that is in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. So be sure to check it out. And check out Dark Albion and the Wilderlands. Wilderlands is a source book for Sword and Caravan, so be sure to buy Sword and Caravan first. And check out all my other products. The list is in the description below. And I guess we'll see you guys all on Wednesday. Currently smoking. This is Stanwell Deluxe. Stanwell Deluxe egg, I guess it would be. I don't know if it... No, that's not an egg. What is this? Is an apple, maybe? I forgot the name. But anyways, Stanwell Deluxe with Argento Natural.